All right, you want to pay attention to this one. Scott Royal Smith is here, and we're going to be talking about snowballing your wealth. And if you don't know what that means, it sounds damn good. We're going to learn about it with Scott. Scott, let's go. What you
Yeah,
got?
it's stoked to
Well,
be here with you, brother.
this is great. I saw some of what you're doing online. I've seen some of your videos. You have a great understanding of how to not only build wealth but to also protect it. And as real estate agents and real estate investors, you're on the right show for us anyway.
Beautiful.
Give us a real quick hint on how you got into this and what does snowballing wealth mean?
Yeah, so snowballing wealth is just how do you compound wealth in a way that's tax advantaged, right? So how do you get above performing assets into your portfolio? And then how do you hold those in such a way that you mitigate the taxes on them, right? So I'll share with you guys here today about how you can effectively do that. And I think this is a conversation that's really applicable to everybody who's really a high income earner, right? So anybody who is making more than say 300,000 as a household income can use these types of strategies to be able to grow their wealth much faster. Not to bury the lead, but we work with clients that with our, a lot of them are saving, on average somewhere between $25 to $100,000 a year off of taxes with proper tax strategy. And then if you can take those tax savings and reinvest them into high performing tax advantage types of assets, over the course of 30 years, that'll end up being somewhere around 30 to $35 million. And it's just off of tax savings. So that's really the big goal.
That's a snowball. That's a staggering number. So where does somebody start with this? They're making that kind of income. Where's their first call? Or who's that to? Is it an accountant? Is it an attorney? Is it a tax attorney? Where's their first call to start figuring this out?
Yeah. So what you really want to do is you really want to hire, my background as an attorney and investor and working on this problem for 12 years has been that, like, if you can afford it, what you really want to do is hire a family office that has full-time CPAs, attorneys, and investment advisors in it. They only work on your case. Now, the problem is to be able to afford those people, you are probably going to end up spending somewhere between $250,000 to $400,000 a year. Well, that actually doesn't work for you, right? If you're only making $300K. Those are the people that are typically in the 25 million plus net worth, because they have so much money that's being in play that they need that type of strategic advice. And so what my company, Royal Legal Solutions, does, and my team, I have all that team that I actually built for myself when I was walking through my wealth journey from coming out of law school and starting to invest in real estate and growing it from there, just like probably many of other people have done coming out of school and working hard on it. And then my company, Royal Legal Solutions, has been doing for the last 12 years has been fractionalizing everything that I built for myself to people. So that way that they can afford, and we can all afford to be able to have what is the very best in strategic tax advice, asset protection, estate planning, and investing.
Great. So the call's to you. That's the phone to pick up. That's the number they should be dialing.
Yeah. And there's some other people that are really great people out there that do less than what we do. Right. And so we're not really the fit for everyone with that. So that's why I say there's other companies that are like, hey, if you're at above a big enough net worth, then, we're not the right people for you. You're going to need more help than we're going to be able to offer you.
Gotcha. So when is it time to recognize, hey, I need this kind of help? Is it just the income or is it more than that?
It's really the income, right? Okay. Income is going to be the big deal, I think, when you're looking at where the really big plays, right? So the majority of the people I find that are interested in this kind of thing are usually between 30 and 55. And they're trying to say, cool, I've accumulated some assets. I need to reposition assets in a way that's going to be able to generate more cash flow for me and maybe some tax advantages for me. Or I want to protect income from tax. So the majority of people are paying somewhere between 25 to 35% or higher in taxes. And once you get up into that income range, when household incomes exceed 300K, right? Our average client, after working with us, will pay somewhere between 10 to 15% outside of the first year. So if we can save even just 10%, knock 10% off of the taxes, at those kinds of income numbers, right? You're talking about first year tax savings alone being 30 to 60K.
Right.
And that's not even taking inside the investing, the portfolio improvements on the investing, just the taxes. So I think and that's where I like to stay first is let's get a monster tax win first. Right. Because if you can just improve the taxes, everything else unlocks.
Okay. So let's start building that snowball.
Yeah. So there's
tax money savings.
Yeah. On the tax front, right? I think a lot of people have typically almost everybody like files their taxes, and then they know about the basic stuff that they can do, right? I'd say this is like your level 1 CPA will file your taxes for you. He'll tell you about home office deductions, how can you structure your business expenses, and maybe moving your cars into your business, as well as maybe like employing your children in some way. And those are you go online, the best CPAs you're going to find, they're going to talk to you about business tax and stuff like that. That's where they're going to stick. That's the majority of the market. That's the majority of places where people are actually taking advantage. Once your income starts getting higher, what you actually need is higher level CPAs. So the next level of CPA should be able to start talking to you about tax shelters. There's a ton of different types of tax shelters you can use. You can use self-directed IRAs, solo 401ks, those types of things. But the problem with those is those only help you in retirement, right? If you want to get financially free faster and you're not going to work until 60, 65, 70, then you need different types of tax shelters that are more advanced. And the best one that we use the most and applies for most circumstances for people is going to be the use of a private foundation. And the very top level CPAs are actually like CFO CPAs and investors. They're the ones that run the financial analysis and the tax analysis to tell you what is the exact investment you need to make for cash flow, net worth, and tax consequences. And how is that all going to map out? If you did that investment versus other investments, how would you expect things to change?
Okay, so what does that mean? Private foundation.
So private foundation is actually a type of charity, but it's a charity that you solely control and that you contribute to.
Okay.
And so the advantage, a lot of people hear that and be like, why would I want to give all my money away to charity? It's like, well, hold on a second. It's the charity is the legal structure, right? Where we're going to use the laws to be able to help us save on taxes. So legally, we can establish our own private foundation, which we're a charity. That means up to 30% of our income, or the equivalent of 30% of our income in assets, we can contribute to that private foundation, just like you made a donation to whoever, right? And that now is a tax write-off for you. So let's say you're making 300,000, you could contribute up to 100K or a blend of 100K in cash with assets. And if you move that money into that private foundation, all of a sudden, you're not paying tax on that $100,000. So if you were at a 30% tax rate, that just saved you 30K in taxes.
Right.
But now you have 100K that's inside of a foundation. I was like, well, okay, that sucks. I got a bunch of money in a nonprofit. What good is that for me? Well, what you can do is you can snowball the money tax-free inside of the nonprofit, can reinvest all of those funds and snowball the money just like an IRA or 401k could inside of that structure. And whenever you're ready to hit the eject button in life where you just need cash because hey, like maybe you had a slow few months or a year or something like that, or maybe you want to retire early, you can take what's called a director's wage for you running that foundation.
Okay.
Now, all the details of how it has to work, how much can you take out of that, et cetera, is where that becomes case specific, and that becomes where like the nuanced like legal and tax knowledge comes in of like how do you have to navigate those loops to get that income? Because everybody else you talk to in the world that says like, hey, you're going to do that, they're like, whoa, I don't know about that. Well, that's because they maybe have never done it before. We've done hundreds or maybe even thousands of these by now.
And it's having the right people on your team that's going to make it.
It's the right thing. It's the right attorneys, the right tax attorneys combined with the right CPAs. And that's really the key to it. Unless you have a high-level CPA and a high-level tax attorney that are used to working together on very specific outcomes that they're trying to achieve, you won't actually get the very best solutions. You'll get something other than the best solution. And everybody who's not doing the best solution will always tell you the best solution isn't possible.
Right. That's right. Good point. So that's one vehicle. What else do you do to continue the snowball rolling?
Yeah. So
you got more than one trick or one process.
So the last leg of the stool is actually the investments, right? So when we look at like an investment portfolio for, let's say we're going to go for, it depends upon like what objective we're trying to achieve. Are we trying to retire you early, right? Or are we trying to say, I work with a lot of people that are like, hey, I hate my W-2 job, but I'm making great money. How can you get me out of this so I can then make more choices about what I want to do with my life? There's a whole other group of people that are out there that says, hey, I actually love my job. I'm a doctor. I've actually worked my ass off to be a doctor. I'm not trying to not be a doctor. Right. I just really want to make sure that I'm taking care of my money correctly. Right? And say, oh, great. Well, then that's a different solution that says, well, let's maximize your net worth for retirement so that you can be balling out of control in a private jet on your retirement if you want, right? Would you want to do that? Is that what you want your retirement years to be like, or what do you envision it to look like, right? So the private foundation allows us to get first-year tax benefits. It's not like 30,000 typically plus in first year tax benefits, and it allows us to grow our wealth tax free. So we can compound that wealth over time without having to pay taxes out every time I exit or enter a stock or any type of investment that I make, right?
Yeah.
So then the only thing that's left is actually to be able to say, well, how do I maximize the returns like on my investments? Right. And what I like to do is to say, well, the reason that you're not investing in the highest performing assets is purely a knowledge and confidence problem. There are groups out there like Tiger 21, Go Abundance, and high net worth investing groups where this is what these dudes like specialize in, is that they're entrepreneurs and then they're also like deep into real estate and in syndications.
Okay.
And then how do we buy fractional interest in syndications? How do we underwrite operators and deals to be able to find investments that are going to turn, anywhere between like 18 to 35% annual returns?
Can you get into syndication a little bit? Just clarify
Yeah.
what that means.
So like if I was gonna, like if you had a $35 million apartment complex and you didn't have all the money that you wanted to take it down by yourself, then what you would do is that you would form a company and then you would fundraise to people and you say, hey, I'll give you shares of my company depending upon the investments how much you invest. And so that's what you have as a syndication. And a syndication, you are the investor that's putting up money and you'll own a fractional share of a much bigger project. So instead of saying like, hey, I'm going to own a single family home or a 1 to 4 unit property, just set aside the fact of all of the work that you actually have to do to find tenants, manage leases, When you go into real estate, your average returns there are going to be 8 to 12%. That type of play. If you invest inside of an apartment complex, that's a $35 million apartment complex, now it's somebody else's job to run that asset. You own a fractional share of it, and they send you checks every quarter. And after 3 to 5 years, the apartment complex that they're, are renovating, they'll sell that and they'll give you back all your money plus a bunch of other money on top of that. And those typical returns are somewhere between 18 to 35% on average.
Now that is obviously fluctuates, and there are multiple variations on that, as I've witnessed, on what they're offering and how it gets paid back. And there's a couple different ways to do it, whether you're lending the money to do it or you're actually buying in, correct?
100%, right? So you're actually, when you're investing in a syndication, what you're actually investing in is as an asset-backed business. I would encourage everybody to think about it in that way. So like you want to vet the entrepreneur and vet the deal and the business. Does the business actually make sense, from what it is that you understand? So inside of those types of businesses that can make sense, though, I'd say that 99% of deals are bad, right? You should go into the assumption saying that most all deals are ones you shouldn't do, right? And because they have some type of critical flaw, right? They can have the entrepreneur, the operator could be shaky in some way. The deal itself could be shaky in some way, or it could be a good deal and a good entrepreneur or good operator, but it's actually bad economic timing.
Right.
Like say interest rates, something or other, and you say, I don't think that the way that they're structuring this deal is going to work out well for the next 3 to 5 years because I have a different viewpoint of what's going to happen in the economy than they do. Right? Say, okay, cool. So to go through that process, what I see is that for people to be really high level investors to get those kinds of returns, it typically ends up being a pretty substantial job, somewhere between 20 to 25 hours a week of deal vetting. If you have substantial assets and they're moving big money, like that's what you're really doing, right? It becomes your job, right? That's why so what do people do is that they say, well, they'll form these investor groups to have crowdsourced knowledge about operators and deals. And then they have high ticket prices, kind of like a country club would be, to get in there and find out who in their collective research and work, which operators and which deals seem to be bubbling to the surface that at least has the opinion of those groups of the highest level people I've been able to find and say, hey, these are the deals that we really like, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I did with World Legal Solutions. I said, well, number one, I was curious about how does the highest level of investing work? So I joined those groups to go learn all of that and meet those people. And that's essentially what I've done. So I spend all of the money, the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to be part of all the groups. One, because they're my friends, but also because I find it super interesting. It helps me with my own investing. It pays for itself by a lot of that. But I'm lucky that I have the time and the flexibility to go there.
Right.
And then for all my clients, what I do is I take back the very best of what I've been able to find over there. And I say, hey, cool. Since you're a member of Royal Legal Solutions, you just get this benefit of saying, here's our short list of the deals. So instead of looking at thousands of deals, you have like 8 to look at.
And for all the others that are in there paying the high ticket number to be there, they feel like you're undercutting them by bringing others in.
Well, you have to be respectful of every organization that you're a part of, right? So there's certain deals that I actually can't bring to my group
Gotcha.
from those groups, right? So
Gotcha.
it only works that the group will get to fill all of the commitments to that operator first. And then I can take it to my group to see, hey, can we help
What
the
else?
operator get over the finish line?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. So that's a huge benefit for being in your, what is it that your clients get? I know you have a group on Facebook. It looks like you have another organization where people get together. What is it that they get from you other than, I mean, obviously you mentioned a lot already. What's the full scope of offerings
Yeah.
that you have?
So the big promise that we make to people is we're going to build you a complete wealth building company that's built and managed for you, and we're going to build it inside of 6 weeks.
No kidding.
So we're looking at 6 week total life transformation on what that looks like. So how do you do that? Is you have to have the team of estate planning, asset protection, and tax attorneys. You have to have the CPAs that also are also CFOs and MBAs, so they can understand how all of the financial planning and the investing has to work. And you need the investment advisory, right? Specialists. And so what we do over the course of the 6 weeks is we do a series of meetings and work product, right? Over the course of that 6 week period to be able to do all of the build. So all of the LLC builds and the trust builds that people will need to make sure they're bulletproof to lawsuits and their assets are protected and hidden from, public eyes, all the estate planning for their family's future. So that way they can take over and properly manage all of the wealth when it gets passed to them. If something happens to you for any reason, get hit by a bus or whatever the case may be, right? We serve as a continuity piece there. So they know what the hell is actually going on. And you don't just like dump a massive structure on somebody that has no clue of what it really is. And then we're able to walk through all of the financial and tax analysis and even chart out like, okay, cool, of these 8 options, which ones are you most interested in? Let's go ahead and look at like what's the impacts of those. We want to make it your personal name. And that's really all it takes. So it's from start to finish, it's 6 weeks. And then we have weekly calls, typically 2 to 3 times a week with all the members of the professional team, the CPA team, the different attorney teams. So if you want to get a hold of everybody by like a personalized meeting, you can do that. If you want to join on a meeting, connect with the group and talk directly to the member of our professional team that's with that, you're able to join in there. So there's tons of community and support, both directly from us, both one-on-one as well inside of group settings that happen every single week.
That's fantastic. So when you say, I know you say coaching, is this the coaching piece of it, the weekly?
It's a free weekly coaching that we offer to everybody that's part of the community.
Okay, and that's coaching on what?
It'll be on whatever the topic is, but what we really find is that whoever shows up with a question will pivot into like what that is, right? I'll be sitting there talking about series LLCs and how you can create like infinitely expandable LLCs for free, which is really great for the 1 to 4 unit real estate investors, for example, to compartmentalize every single asset they have and hide, and then somebody will come and say, well, how do you use that in conjunction with a land trust? It's like, okay, well, this is a series LLC topic, but let's talk about land trusts and how that helps you like anonymize the ownership of the asset, avoid the due on sale clause, transfer it without having to tell your banks or have to worry about any legal implications there. And how does all that work? So that's all of the continuing ed. And then we have 13 ebooks and a few hundred videos that are on all of the topics that I've built and me and the team have built over the last 6 years of here's all of the most common topics, discussions, and FAQs that people run into that they have problems with as they're learning about their wealth building company, right? Because we can't teach everything to everybody one-on-one in a group setting, but
Right.
we have those resources to be able to refer people to that says, hey, cool, watch this 7-minute video first, and then let me know what questions you have after.
That's great. It sounds pretty all-inclusive. Let's talk about LLCs. You mentioned them, and I know they're even on the investors who aren't at that high level. LLCs are still extremely important, correct?
I think everybody should have at least 2. You want one. The key to wealth is what I found over the time is that no matter is you always want to plan with the end in mind. And planning with the end in mind actually means that you're having to do things that don't feel appropriate in the moment. And it's because you're setting like a foundation that you're growing into, right? Of course, we can all just run and gun like solo, right? I'll run my business, I'll do it in my personal name. All my assets, I'm going to own them all in my personal name. And I'm just moving quick, hustling, banging the phones, taking meetings and trying to make money, right? That's almost all of us, right? When we're in the very beginnings stages. You don't see anybody that has actually any real wealth doing that, do you? Right. So when do you actually start? This is the big question, right? And I think it's always important that we start doing things the right way from the very beginning, but we right size it, right? So it's not a question of do I do asset protection or not to protect myself from lawsuits. It's how much do I need, right? And so when we come into the discussion of LLCs, I think that my best advice for everybody is to start at least with two. One is something you should operate all of your business endeavors off of if you legally can in any way, right? I know, but especially with real estate agents, there's some tricky nuances too in some states, anyway, about whether you can operate through an LLC or not. But you really want to if you can, because you want separation between you and yourself from any business dealing that you're doing. You want the LLC to take the heat, not you personally. Even if you don't own any assets, if somebody sues you personally, it hurts your credit score, which means like it hurts your ability to get financing, which hurts your ability to do deals, right? So your credit score is an asset, so you have to protect that with some type of operating company, an LLC that doesn't own anything but does all of your business. Apart from that operating company, LLC, that owns everything, or that does everything but doesn't own anything, you have an asset holding company. The asset holding company doesn't touch anybody, doesn't talk to anybody, doesn't do anything. All it does is just hold the assets. And we want it to be like this bucket of money and assets, and that has no liability attached to it. And to the extent that we need to compartmentalize liability inside of it, then we would need more LLCs or a series LLC or something like that. But that's what I would say for every single person. If you don't have at least two LLCs, then you're not really taking the first fundamental steps of learning how to operate and do business the right way. And what you'll find is your wealth will grow, and then you'll say, "Oh, I got bigger problems now because I didn't build this the right way."
Yeah, so it's easy to start small and stack as opposed to wait until it's big.
Absolutely, right? The big ticket. And then if you're making enough money, right, and you can afford a firm that's like mine that does like a holistic service, then you get every area of your life gets covered off on like the appropriate amount, and it all gets paid for by tax savings, which I think is ideal. But if you can't afford, or you're not ready for somebody that's like at my level or my company's level, then I would say just do whatever you think is like sound and appropriate, but you definitely want at least those two LLCs.
Gotcha. What else you got? Digging through.
Yeah, we're really moving through a lot of like. I hope everybody's brain isn't melting.
I know
Right now.
it's quite a bit. I've heard.
Let's talk about the estate planning. Let's like build out the structure. I think that's something I share a little bit about on the homepage of the website or in the videos. Is I have some diagrams in there to show you like here's what a standard structure should look like for most people. So a lot of people will, unfortunately, they'll either do one of two things. They don't want to even think about what happens if I die, or like what's going to happen with everything, right? So they don't do an estate plan, because it's like that's morbid, feels like whatever. But we got to put on big girl panties over here and actually just say, hey, like that's part of being a man, is actually just looking stuff that's uncomfortable in the face and being like, cool, those are the appropriate things for me to do to make sure the people in my life are taken care of. So I'm going to go through something that's a little uncomfortable. The other thing that people will do is they'll say, well, they did all of that, and then they looked at it once and they never looked at it again, which actually means everything they did was actually a waste, right? Because an estate plan that's effective about being able to have the right continuity of your assets and everything you've worked so hard to take care of the people that you care about when you go requires you to move assets into the structures underneath that estate plan. Underneath that living trust is actually the technical legal vehicle for it, right? So most people won't have transferred the assets into their asset holding company, where their asset holding company is in turn owned by the trust, or they don't even transfer it to the trust. It's just sitting around on their personal name. And it's like, great, well, you got a trust. You built an estate plan. You have a trust. It's absolutely worthless because it doesn't have all of the assets and the companies underneath it. So you have to connect those things in the appropriate way to be able to make sure that you're managing that correctly on the setup and the maintenance. And with that, you need to review it once a year to make sure everything is like transferred into it appropriately. Make sure any updates and modifications for things that have changed in your circumstances, life, or family. And then also to make sure that at least once a year that whoever is going to be managing the assets and everything that's going to happen that they're going to need to do when you die, or if you die in the next year or whatever, that they're at least getting refreshed on like, where are those documents? Who am I supposed to call? What does it actually look like? It doesn't have to take long, maybe like 15 minutes, right? But it's good to do a yearly refresher around things that are like, well, will anybody know where all of the bank accounts are and the logins and the passwords and the emails are? Does anybody know where all the cash is at? Does anybody know how to get into the brokerage account?
Gotcha. Now, there's a couple different kinds of trusts too, correct? Where some you can move money in and out, some you can't. Is that?
Yeah, so those are two different categories of like trusts, right? So they're both trusts. When we talk about estate planning, what we're talking about is something that's called a revocable. It's a revocable trust, meaning that you can revoke it. You can rescind it and do whatever out of that, right? That is what a living trust is. A living trust is a revocable trust that becomes irrevocable when you die, right? And so
Gotcha.
it's like locked in. It has to do everything and operate, who controls it, where the assets go, et cetera. But until you die, you get to do whatever you want. Then there's other types of trusts that we'll work with that are really asset protection trusts. So those are types of things like a good example of that would be like a Delaware or a Wyoming statutory trust. And those types of trusts will have asset protection principles associated with them. So that way, if you're sued, they can't get to the assets of the trust, right? And if somebody for some reason sues an asset that's outside the trust, they can't get to you.
All right. Can you explain the Delaware a little bit, how that's structured?
Yeah. So Delaware trusts, Delaware statutory trusts are structured in the same way that series LLCs are for asset protection purposes. So with both of those types of legal structures, you will create a parent entity. That parent entity can create as many child entities at once for free. So it becomes an infinitely scalable company for free. Each child entity is treated like its own separate entity for asset protection purposes. So that means that if somebody sues property A or some deal blows up inside of property or inside of child A, they can't get to child B, C, D, etc.
Gotcha.
They also can't get to you because the assets are all owned by the trust. Similarly, if you got into a car accident that exceeded the limits of liability of your car insurance policy, which can happen even if you have an umbrella policy in place, everybody should have an umbrella policy in place. If you don't, insurance is super important. And it's really cheap, actually, if you know strategically how to buy it. Then what you end up finding is they're like, hey, they can't get to your assets. They might try to sue you in some way, but there's nothing there for them to get to, which really is something they figure out really early on, is that there's no assets they can get to, and then the lawsuits get dropped. So that's actually how you defeat lawsuits before they even start, is by having the right asset protection structure in place, because essentially you defeat the business of lawsuits. Because if attorneys don't get paid and people don't get paid, guess what? Like, they know we're trying to sue you.
That's right. It sounds so fundamental that this should be thought of very, very early on.
Yeah, at least to some degree, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to have necessarily like all the bells and whistles of like everything all built out at one time, right? But you need to take the appropriate steps that are there, and then it can get really tricky, I think, for a lot of people, or at least it was really tricky for me for years, because I must have spent 5+ years trying to source the right information and the right teams of people. What I found when I was like working with, I don't know if this matches your experience, Joe, but what I found when I was starting to like look inside of this journey, who are going to be my asset protection advisors, I'm an attorney, but I was an attorney, but I was working on litigation and I was investing. I didn't know anything about asset protection structures. So I was learning this from like other attorneys and trying to figure it out. And what I found, and I don't know if this is true for you too, but what I found was that it seemed like either people only knew what they knew from their level of income and investing experience. And so anything that I had that was above their own personal experience, they were like, don't really know how to help you with that, right? Most all the time. And then I would find that other thing that kind of like pissed me off a little bit was that I kept running into guys that would try to sell me into an idea that they had like a single product or a single solution. And then they were like, everybody should use my solution. Right. The one size fits all thing. And if you go to that guy, you know what he's always going to recommend. It's always going to be, oh, I want you to get a New Mexico LLC, because he's the New Mexico LLC guy, right? And which, you got to, like, with all of it. And I was like, well, that's really frustrating, because I know that like my situation isn't exactly that. And I can't really figure out why, this person I got 8 different people I'm talking to, and they're all telling me 8 different things. Like, this can't be the case.
Right.
Have you found that to be the case for you? Like professionals? Like who to talk to, like how to find the right people seems to be damn near impossible.
Yeah, it's always trying to hang around with the people that are better than, at a higher level than I am. That's probably the biggest place where I learned. Hey, so
that's the same way I learned too. That's why I like that's why I like to spend all the money on the investment groups, because those guys have way more money than I do. I've talked about a lot of the problems that I've had. Oh, hold on, I lost audio.
That's me.
Okay.
So now you're one of those guys that people want to hang around to get up to where you are.
Some people. And then a lot of people, and then I'm trying to hang out with the other guys at the hot tub over there, because I'm trying to get where they're at,
So I'm curious. I heard a little bit about your journey. Yeah, you were in law school. You flipped your first house during law school to pay it off. And was this a plan to get into real estate investment early on, or did it just kind of happen?
Man, I gotta tell you that like I feel like my plans are worthless to a large degree, because like life doesn't comport to my plan. We could sit around like a campfire and probably talk about that as like a question for a couple hours, But what I find is that the most successful people are actually ones that are the ones that actually can control their mind and emotions. And for the longest time in my life, I always thought that that was like a super hippy dippy kind of concept, right? Oh, cool. That's so cool. You're controlling your mind and emotions. You got inner peace, blah, blah, blah. I'm over here trying to make money right now, dude. Like, what are you trying to talk to me about peace for? Why does that matter?
Right.
Why would you care about controlling your mind and emotions will always make you more money. It'll make you infinitely more money. And the reason why is because you can only take advantage of the opportunities that exist if you can see them. And the more that you have kicking up inside of yourself of like what's going on in there, whether it's anxiety or confusion or how fast your mind runs, some people think that's good. It's not. It's actually clouding everything. The less you can see. And so if you can learn to control your mind and emotions and find somebody that actually knows how to do it, it's like worse than syndications. The people that actually know how to teach and actually how to do that kind of work is maybe 1 in 10,000 of the 10,000 people that say they know how to do it. They don't know how to do it, you know? But that's actually what I find is the real secret to success. And that actually is, you'll find it as a trait among the higher net worth people that have started with nothing. The people that have started with nothing that have big money and they're consistently doing that, starting with nothing and having big money, they'll either know how to do it or they have inherently kind of figured it out for themselves without somebody teaching them. But they
Right.
will always know how to do it.
Just because they're clear-headed, they're paying attention, and they can see it.
Yeah, and you actually don't. If you're clear-headed, you don't have to try to pay attention.
Right.
That's the biggest like of the whole deal
Right.
is that you actually once you become clear-headed, you don't have to try anymore. You're just
Yes.
observing. Here's the opportunities that are here, and what would I like to do with this without having any confusion.
So there's this is I have noise in my head, and I can shut it off, yet it comes back. Now,
Right.
are you at the point where you don't even have noise?
So it's not about never having noise, right? There will always be instances of noise, right? The trick is to keep separated from the noise. So there's talked about this, right? And this is probably going to get, if this goes everybody's head, don't sweat it. Okay, this is like a 301 level type of discussion about like this topic, right? So if we talk about like mind and emotions and how do you keep those like clear, right? There's some really key points to do that, right? And so if you learn about those, which it sounds like you have, right? And you say, well, cool, is there never noise? I would bet that if we were to sit with each other and to work on this together, what we would find is that the point at which you find that there's noise going on in your head is also the point at which you've lost concentration.
Yeah,
That if you're
absolutely.
yeah, it's not eliminating the noise that becomes the issue. It's how do you have constant concentration without fatigue, right? And how do you do that? Well, the trick to being able to do that is to learn to have concentration with active relaxation. So you can be moving and I can be doing everything I need to do, but I'm constantly concentrating on my inner relaxation. And when my inner relaxation is happening and I'm concentrating on that, even if a thought like pops up or something else like that pops up inside of me, I see it as just something that popped up as if a bird flew by.
Right.
But it doesn't distract me and it doesn't really go into anything else any more than what a bird flying by would do.
Yeah. And do you find too that when you're when you're constantly relaxing and you well practiced at that, when something outside of your brain goes sideways, like, you break a dish or something, it's no longer, it's not like, oh my God, it's just, I broke a dish, I have to clean it up, move on.
Yeah, I actually find that you're able to regulate all of your external things much faster than you're actually able to regulate the internal,
Yeah.
right? All the external things you can actually mute those down right away. People yelling at you, something, whatever. Some things are bigger than others, right? Somebody pulling a gun on me is a lot bigger than somebody cutting me off in traffic, right? Well, that's like, well, okay, what's that going to do? How am I going to deal with that? What's that going to be like, right? But what you find is that with a little bit of practice, you actually become superhuman among all of your peers that you work with and you associate with. So much so that they're like, how in the world could you possibly do that? That sounds impossible. And you're like, actually, it's ridiculously simple. The more advanced and harder thing to get is actually the true internal stillness. And that's where all the money is.
Right.
There's a little bit of money in being able to control your behavior. We've all seen that, right? Which is why we all try to regulate our behaviors with each other socially, right? Because we know it helps us make more money, have more power, have more prestige, have more influence, blah, 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 right? But the real big money, the thing that's going to put multiple zeros in your bank account behind whatever number you got there right now is the internal as the internal stillness, because it's the internal stillness that lets you see the opportunities, that lets you take advantage of what the things are that are just here. And then you can just take money and pick it up. It's like, oh, there's money. I'll just pick that up.
That's good. That's great. Well, I think that's a great spot to end this. Mental calmness, if we all can work on that. And so actually, that's one more question on that. So is it a point where it still is a practice? Like you still have to practice staying calm. And is that true, or is it become
Yeah,
automatic at some point?
it's like,
You can tell I'm striving for this, right?
yeah. No, I can tell you're actually like you're a seeker. So I'm trying to find the right words to try to see, like, to treat this question with the respect that it deserves. I would make it akin to when you sit, like, for like a, why would anybody ever sit for like a formal practice, right? A formal meditation practice, or what breathing practice, where it would be, right? And to me, the way that I like to explain that for everybody is say, like, it's like akin to like learning how to play basketball. That, like, initially you had to learn how to dribble and you were terrible at it, right? And so what did you have to do? You had to like run drills to practice how to dribble, right? And so you're like, oh, cool, you're practicing how to dribble, and you're dribbling around and you get it. But what happens eventually, like with enough practice, enough time, you're dribbling, but are you having to think about dribbling?
Right.
It just becomes like the natural way in which you engage, right? And then there's actually really no effort associated with it until what happens? Well, something happened out there. Maybe it's the right kind of girl walked by, or the right thing happened that pisses you off, that pushed that button that's still just a little too much for you, and you get lost in it for a second. It's like, okay, all right, cool, I'm going to come back to my dribble. And I got lost for a second, so let me come back to my dribble.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. That's the limit that life has offered me of the next drill I get to work on. I said, okay, that's where I'm still developing my skill set. Okay, cool. That's great. That's fun. Let me see how I can work on that one, because I'd like to be that free and that powerful that even that thing can't throw me, because I'm still just always right here.
Right.
Does that analogy make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does very much
Okay.
so. Yeah. Good.
I'm glad we can have this conversation. Actually, I don't really get to
love
talk
it. I
about
love it.
this too much with people. It's my big passion. I think it's the
Yeah.
biggest. It's the biggest that everybody knows about and nobody's talking about, and almost nobody knows how to do right. That I find.
Well, I had some friends that turned me on to meditation a long time ago, and I read about it. I was practicing a bit, never more than probably 10 minutes. Never self. It was all self guided, and then somebody turned me on to a guided meditation, which was totally different and just great. And then I lost it for a while. I stopped doing it, and then I had an opportunity to have some medical treatments on me where my head had to be fastened to the table, and I'm claustrophobic. I was out of my mind scared that I was going to like freak out when I first saw this mask. They're going to tie me down. And it actually, I was able to just sit there, and it became relaxing to that point, because and I didn't realize it was that dribbling that you're talking about. I had that down, and it kicked in without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't even realize it till like well after it was over. It was interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that dribbling, keep practicing.
It's practice all the time. You know, there's never, I don't think there's ever an opportunity in which me being relaxed internally isn't beneficial to me and to everything else that's going on.
Absolutely.
So there's
everybody around you too, right?
well, everybody around me now, like when I walk into a meeting or to like a group or like whatever, you know, that's the feedback I get. It's like everything, just like the whole like thing, everybody becomes more calm, more focused, happier, more joyful.
Nice.
You know, it becomes like a thing about like everything, that ways that you wanted everybody to respond to you and view you. All of those hopes and dreams that we had about who is the man I'm going to be, and a lot of those are phrased into like how other people will see you, right? And how will you impact them, right? All of those things actually occur naturally without you having to try, if you can do this one thing, and it just results. Right. And it comes from the practice. It's practice all the time, practicing. Oh, what are you practicing? I'm practicing how to be internally relaxed but physically active. Now that's actually a pretty advanced practice. If you can't do that, then don't be physically active. Just sit and try to see if you can relax.
Right.
And then once you can learn how to do that, see how much you can move before you lose your concentration. And once you lose your concentration, now you know you're off in the world and you're lost. Oh, great. Now come back to practicing. Come back to dribbling.
There are sometimes when I'm out in nature and I'm walking around, and I look at something, it's almost like it's the first time I've seen it. And I remember looking at it like that when I was a little kid. It's like I see the details. I see the light shining off of the cobwebs in the middle of the woods, and just start to see all that stuff. And normally in the past, I'd just be running by it.
Yeah.
And now I want to slow it down and take a look and really see it.
Yeah. How much better is life if we can actually just see everything that's happening on? It's pretty freaking incredible.
It is. It
You know,
is.
like all of this stuff is wild. Actually, it only becomes not amazing at the moment at which we're so busy running
Right.
that we're actually not observing.
Right.
And the running actually never got us anywhere anyway, because all the opportunities and all the things that we thought we were running for only exist in the moment that we can see them, which only exists if we can be calm enough to observe them. So
Very
let's
good.
just stop running.
Let's end that here. It's awesome. This has been great. Scott, thank you for everything. That's the best way for people to get in touch with you.
Yeah, just go to royallegalsolutions.com and then hit up my team. And if you want to reach out to me personally for any reason, you can always do that at scott@royallegalsolutions.com.
And I'll have you tagged so people can follow you there and
Oh,
find you.
man. I love this show. Thank you so much for having me on, brother. This was great.
Hey, it's been a blast. Viewers, subscribe, be your best, have fun.